an original story narrated exclusively for Love Written in Silence. Adelaide Fairchild stands in the drawing room of Ravenslee House, candlelight catching the pale silk of her gown, as the entire assembly watches in silence. The Duke of Ravenslee descends the grand staircase, his expression unreadable, his hand steady on the banister. Lady Octavia's smile is sharp, her words still hanging in the air like poison. Adelaide does not lower her gaze, does not retreat, though her pulse hammers beneath her composure. Gabriel stops 3 steps from the floor, turns to face the room, and speaks with a clarity that shatters years of careful control. The music has stopped, the dancers frozen, and in this moment, a man who has never risked anything prepares to lose everything. Adelaide's fingers tremble at her sides, but her chin remains lifted, because she knows what it means to refuse to wait, and he is about to learn what it costs to finally choose. The study smelled of beeswax and old paper. Adelaide Fairchild sat at her father's desk, the French text open before her, her pen poised above a half-finished translation. Outside, London's spring evening settled into gentle dark. Inside, the candle flame bent and straightened with her breath. She had refused Sir Edmund, Hartley that morning, politely, firmly, without room for negotiation. Her father had said nothing, only nodded once and returned to his books. Her mother would have wept, not from disappointment, but from recognition. Adelaide remembered her mother's face in the years before her death. Pleasant, agreeable, slowly erased by the weight of being always secondary. The translation before her was Rousseau, but not the social contract her father approved. This was from the lesser-known essays, the ones that questioned whether matrimony as practiced served any purpose beyond property consolidation. Scandalous, if anyone knew she was rendering them into English. Dangerous, if anyone knew she intended to publish them under a nom de plume. But Adelaide had watched her mother disappear inside respectability. She had no intention of following. Sir Edmund had been kind, wealthy enough, handsome in a forgettable way. He had offered her a comfortable life, a respected name, 3 children if God willed it, and a household she could manage with grace. He had not once asked what she thought about anything. The refusal had been easy. The aftermath would be harder. At 24, Adelaide was already aging out of the market. Another season, perhaps 2, and she would be firmly on the shelf, pleasant but peculiar, admired from a distance, but not pursued. She dipped her pen again, forming careful English from careful French. The work steadied her. It always had. A knock at the study door. Her father entered, spectacles perched low on his nose. "Lady Pemberton's salon tomorrow evening," he said. "She's asked specifically for you." Adelaide set down her pen. "I'm not certain I'm in a social mood. It's not a ball, my dear. It's conversation. Philosophy. Lady Pemberton values your mind." Adelaide considered. Lady Pemberton's gatherings were different, rare spaces where women could speak without performing. No dance cards, no desperate mothers, no measuring glances. Very well. Her father smiled faintly. "There's talk the Duke of Ravenslee may attend." Adelaide's hand stilled. She had seen Gabriel St. Clair precisely twice. Once at a distance during a parliamentary session her father had taken her to, once at the opera, where he had occupied a box alone and left at intermission. Both times she had been struck by the same impression. A man constructed entirely of discipline, admired universally, known by no one. "I'm sure His Grace will find the evening tolerable," Adelaide said evenly. Her father's smile deepened. "I'm sure he will." When he left, Adelaide returned to her translation, but the words blurred slightly. She told herself it was only fatigue. The candle flame bent again, casting her shadow long across the wall. She would not wait. Not for Sir Edmund, not for any man who required her to become smaller. If that meant spinsterhood, so be it. She had her work, her books, her mind intact. Outside, the city settled into night. Inside, Adelaide Fairchild made a quiet vow to remain herself, whatever the cost. The flame burned steady. Lady Pemberton's drawing room glowed with subdued elegance. No orchestra, no receiving line, only clusters of guests engaged in actual conversation. Adelaide arrived with her father, who was immediately drawn into a debate on classical translations. She accepted a glass of wine and moved toward the bookshelves, grateful for the reprieve. The room was smaller than a ballroom, more intimate. Paintings of Italian landscapes lined the walls. A pianoforte stood silent in the corner. The guests were artists, scholars, a few minor nobility, who preferred ideas to gossip. Adelaide was examining a volume of Dante when she felt the shift in the room's attention. Gabriel St. Clair had entered. He moved with the economy of someone accustomed to being watched. Tall, dark-haired, impeccably dressed in charcoal and black. His expression was pleasant and utterly unreadable. Lady Pemberton greeted him warmly. He responded with perfect courtesy and no warmth whatsoever. Adelaide returned her attention to the book. She had no interest in joining the subtle orbit forming around him. "Do you read Italian, Miss Fairchild?" She turned. He stood 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back, watching her with polite curiosity. "Enough to navigate Dante poorly, Your Grace. That's more than most." He glanced at the spine. "Purgatorio. An interesting choice. I find hell gets too much attention. Perhaps because it's more dramatically satisfying. Or because suffering is easier to depict than transformation." He regarded her for a moment. And Adelaide had the unsettling sense of being catalogued. Not dismissed, assessed. "You're Baron Fairchild's daughter." "I am. He speaks highly of your scholarship." "He's generous. I doubt that. Your father is many things, but generous with false praise is not among them." Adelaide met his gaze directly. "Then I'll accept the compliment, and assume you didn't approach me solely to discuss my father's temperament." This time, the amusement reached his eyes. "Fair enough. I approached because you're the only person in this room not attempting to engage me in conversation, and yet here you are, forcing me to do exactly that." Touché. A small silence fell, not uncomfortable, but charged. Adelaide became aware that others were watching discreetly, but watching nonetheless. "Lady Pemberton mentioned earlier that you have opinions on Rousseau's social contract," Gabriel said. "I'm curious what they are." Adelaide set down her wine glass. "I think Rousseau was brilliant and utterly impractical. He idealized a state of nature that never existed and proposed a collective will that assumes human beings are capable of sustained selflessness. They are not. A pessimist, then. A realist. The social contract works only when enforced by structures that assume the worst of us, not the best." Gabriel tilted his head slightly. "So you prefer Hobbes?" "I prefer not reducing human nature to a single philosophical framework. We are neither inherently noble nor inherently savage. We are context-dependent, self-interested, and occasionally capable of transcending both." "Occasionally." "Yes, occasionally." He was silent for a moment, and Adelaide had the distinct impression she had surprised him. Not offended, surprised. "You disagree," she added. "No. I'm considering whether I agree more than I'd like to." Adelaide smiled faintly. "How inconvenient for you." "Quite." The conversation around them had resumed, the attention drifting elsewhere. Gabriel glanced toward the door, then back at her. "I should circulate. Lady Pemberton will think me rude. You've been perfectly polite, Your Grace. Politeness and courtesy are not the same thing." "No, they're not." He inclined his head, preparing to leave. Adelaide felt the moment closing, the distance reasserting itself. She should let him go. It would be easier. Instead, she spoke. "I won't wait, Your Grace." He paused, turned back slightly. "I beg your pardon. If you intend to treat me with the same polite distance you offer everyone else, that's your prerogative. But I won't wait for you to decide. I'm worth more than courtesy." The words were calm, clear, without flirtation or challenge. Simply a boundary, stated plainly. Gabriel St. Clair looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not displeasure, but something closer to recognition. "I see." Adelaide picked up her wine glass. "I thought you might." She turned back to the bookshelf, effectively ending the exchange. When she glanced back a moment later, he was gone. Her father appeared at her elbow. What did his Grace want? "I'm not entirely sure," Adelaide said truthfully. But as the evening continued, she felt the weight of his gaze twice more from across the room. And when she left, her father's arm steady beneath her hand, she did not look back. The carriage ride home was quiet. Her father asked no questions. Adelaide watched the city pass outside the window, lamplight catching on wet cobblestones. She had set a boundary with the Duke of Ravensleigh. She had no idea if he would respect it, but she knew with absolute certainty that she would not compromise it. The flame, once lit, did not easily extinguish. The invitation arrived 4 days later. Heavy paper, elegant script, sealed with the Ravensleigh crest. Adelaide broke the seal carefully. her father watching from across the breakfast table. Miss Fairchild, I am hosting a small gathering of scholars and friends at Ravensleigh House this Saturday evening. Your father has spoken often of your interest in classical texts. My library may be of interest to you. I hope you will attend. Yours in courtesy, Ravensleigh Adelaide. Read it twice. The tone was formal, the invitation genuine. No flirtation, no presumption, only an offer that acknowledged her mind. Well, her father asked. He's invited me to see his library. Her father's expression remained neutral, but she caught the faint approval in his eyes. The Ravensleigh collection is extraordinary, third largest private library in England. If you're interested in scholarship, it would be foolish to refuse. Adelaide folded the letter. And if I'm not interested in scholarship, then you're not my daughter. She smiled despite herself. Saturday evening, then. Her father returned to his newspaper. Where the blue silk, it suits you. Ravensleigh House stood on the edge of Mayfair, old stone and vast windows, built for power, but somehow austere. Adelaide arrived with her father as the spring evening softened into dusk. Lanterns lit the entrance. A butler admitted them without ceremony. Inside, the house was exactly as she'd imagined. High ceilings, dark wood, paintings of stern ancestors watching from the walls, but it was not cold. Fires burned in every hearth. The air smelled of beeswax and old leather. Lady Pemberton greeted them warmly. Miss Fairchild, how lovely. His Grace is in the music room, but I suspect he'll find you shortly. The gathering was small, perhaps 20 guests. Scholars, a few members of Parliament, 2 poets Adelaide recognized by reputation. Conversation hummed quietly, punctuated by laughter. Adelaide moved toward the library. The doors stood open, revealing floor-to-ceiling shelves, volumes in Latin, Greek, French, Italian. A fire burned low in the hearth. She stepped inside, drawn by instinct. The collection was staggering. First editions, rare translations, manuscripts she had only read about. She ran her fingers lightly along the spines. Reverend. You read Latin. She turned. Gabriel stood in the doorway, watching her. I do. And Greek, enough to embarrass myself. He stepped inside, closing the door halfway. You're welcome to borrow anything that interests you. Adelaide met his gaze. That's generous. It's practical. Books are meant to be read, not admired. Not everyone agrees. No, but I do. He moved to the shelves, pulled down a slim volume, handed it to her. Epictetus, the Discourses. Greek on one side, Latin on the other. If you're interested in Stoicism, this is foundational. Adelaide opened it carefully. The pages were old, the ink faded but legible. This must be worth a fortune. It's worth more if someone reads it. She looked up at him. Why? Why what? Why invite me here? Why offer me access to this? Gabriel was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter. Because you told me you wouldn't wait. And I realized I've spent years expecting people to. Adelaide's breath caught. It was the most honest thing she'd heard him say. I don't know what you want from me, Your Grace. Neither do I. But I'd like to find out. The door opened wider. A woman entered, beautiful, poised, dressed in emerald silk. Her gaze moved from Gabriel to Adelaide, assessing instantly. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton, is asking for you. Gabriel's expression smoothed into politeness. Of course, Lady Octavia, may I introduce Miss Adelaide Fairchild? Miss Fairchild, Lady Octavia Langford. Octavia's smile was perfect. A pleasure, Miss Fairchild. I've heard your father is quite the scholar. He is. How lovely that his Grace shares that interest. The words were polite, but the undertone was clear. You are out of your depth. Gabriel's gaze flicked to Adelaide, something unreadable in his expression. If you'll excuse me, he left. Octavia remained a moment longer, her smile never faltering. The Ravensleigh Library is impressive, isn't it? I'm afraid I find most of it dreadfully dull. But then, I've never had a scholarly temperament. Adelaide closed the Epictetus carefully. That must be very freeing. Octavia's smile sharpened. It is. She left. Adelaide stood alone in the library, the book still in her hands. Through the half-open door, she heard music beginning in the next room. A pianoforte. Something soft and melancholy. She should return to the gathering. Instead, she sank into the chair by the fire and opened the book. The Greek was difficult, but the Latin clarified. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. She read until the fire burned low and the music stopped. When she finally emerged, Gabriel was standing in the hallway, alone. I thought you'd left. I was reading. Did you find it worthwhile? Very. He stepped closer. Not too close, but enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his eyes. You're welcome to return. Anytime. That's dangerous, Your Grace. Why? Because I might actually take you up on it. His mouth curved barely, but unmistakably. I'm counting on it. Adelaide left Ravenslee House that evening with the Epictetus under her arm, and the unsettling sense that something had shifted irreversibly. Her father said nothing on the ride home, but when they arrived, he squeezed her hand once. Be careful, Adelaide. Of what? Of forgetting that dukes are still men, and men, however disciplined, are rarely as controlled as they appear. Adelaide thought of Gabriel's expression in the library, the brief, unguarded moment before Octavia had entered. I'll remember. But as she climbed the stairs to her room, the book pressed against her chest, she wasn't certain she wanted to. Adelaide returned to Ravenslee House 3 times over the next 2 weeks. Each visit was ostensibly for the library. Each time, Gabriel found her there. Their conversations were careful, layered. He spoke little of himself, but she learned to read the pauses, the brief hesitations before he answered, the way his gaze drifted to the window when she asked about his family. On the 3rd visit, she asked directly, Why did you never marry, Your Grace? They were standing by the tall library windows. Late afternoon light, slanting across the floor. Gabriel's expression didn't change, but his hands stilled on the book he'd been holding. That's a personal question, Miss Fairchild. You've asked me several. Fair enough. He set the book down. I was engaged once, briefly. It was a suitable arrangement, good families, mutual respect, all the necessary components. What happened? My sister became ill. His voice was even, but something tightened in his jaw. Catherine, she was 22. A fever that seemed minor became something else. She died within a week. Adelaide's chest constricted. I'm sorry. The engagement ended shortly after. My fiancé's family felt I was too preoccupied with grief to be a suitable husband. They weren't wrong. That's monstrous. Gabriel looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. It was practical. It was cruel. He was silent for a long moment. Catherine made me promise, before she died, that I wouldn't marry for strategy, that I'd choose something real, or choose nothing at all. And you chose nothing. I chose control. It seemed safer. Adelaide understood then, the discipline, the distance, the careful politeness that kept everyone at arm's length. He had turned grief into armor. May I see her portrait? Adelaide asked quietly. Gabriel's gaze sharpened. How did you know there was one? Your housekeeper mentioned her. And this house feels like a place that remembers. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. This way. He led her through corridors she hadn't seen before, past closed doors and silent rooms. They stopped before a portrait, covered with a cloth. Gabriel hesitated, then pulled the cloth aside. Catherine St. Clair had been lovely, dark hair, kind eyes, a smile that suggested mischief barely contained. She wore a pale yellow gown, and in her hands was a book. She looks like someone I would have liked, Adelaide said. She would have liked you. Gabriel's voice was rough. She had no patience for performative femininity. She read philosophy and argued with my tutors and refused to pretend she was less intelligent than she was. She sounds extraordinary. She was. Adelaide looked at him, really looked. His expression was carefully neutral, but his hands were clenched at his sides. You don't have to hide your grief from me, she said softly. I'm not hiding it. You are. You've been hiding it for 3 years. Gabriel's jaw tightened. What would you have me do? Weep in corridors? Rage at God? Grief doesn't change anything, Miss Fairchild. Catherine is still gone, but you're still here, and you're allowed to feel it. He turned away from the portrait, his shoulders rigid. I've spent 3 years ensuring I feel as little as possible. It's the only way I've managed to function. Adelaide stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough that he couldn't ignore her presence. That's not functioning. That's surviving. They're not the same thing. Gabriel looked at her then, and for the first time, she saw past the discipline to the exhaustion beneath. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not willing to give. Then why are you here? Because you invited me, and because I think you're tired of being alone. The silence stretched between them, charged and fragile. Gabriel's hand moved, almost unconsciously, toward hers, then stopped. I should return you to the drawing room. You should. Neither of them moved. Finally, Gabriel stepped back, his expression smoothing into something safer. Forgive me. That was inappropriate. It was honest. Honesty is often inappropriate. Adelaide smiled faintly. Then I'm guilty of it constantly. They returned to the drawing room in silence. The other guests barely noticed their absence. But when Adelaide left that evening, she glanced back once. Gabriel stood at the window, silhouetted against the fading light, watching her carriage pull away. That night, Adelaide lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had seen Gabriel St. Clair vulnerable, and it had not diminished him. If anything, it had made him unbearably real. She was falling in love with him. Slowly, carefully, against every instinct of self-preservation, and she had no idea if he felt the same. The whispers began subtly. Adelaide first noticed them at Lady Harrington's afternoon tea, a gathering she attended only because her father insisted. The usual pleasantries were exchanged, but the warmth had cooled. Conversation stopped when she approached. Smiles became fixed. Lady Harrington herself was perfectly polite, but Adelaide was not invited to join the smaller group, retiring to the conservatory afterward. She mentioned it to her father that evening. Perhaps they're simply preoccupied, he said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. The next week, Adelaide received a note from an old school friend, gently suggesting they postpone their planned outing. No explanation, just regret. Then the invitations stopped arriving. It was Lady Pemberton who finally told her the truth. They were alone in the library at Pemberton House, ostensibly reviewing a translation Adelaide had completed. Lady Pemberton set down her teacup with deliberate care. My dear, I must tell you something unpleasant. Adelaide's stomach tightened. Go on. There are rumors circulating about you, about your writings, my translations, not just translations. There's talk that you've been composing essays, questioning the institution of marriage, that you seek to undermine respectability itself. Adelaide's hands went cold. That's absurd. I've translated French philosophy. Yes, but I've never. It doesn't matter what you've actually done. What matters is what's being said. And what's being said is that you're using intellectual pretense to ensnare the Duke of Ravensleigh. The room tilted slightly. Ensnare? That you're manipulating his interest in scholarship to secure a position far above your station. That you're dangerous. Who's saying this? Lady Pemberton hesitated. I don't have proof, but Lady Octavia Langford has been remarkably vocal in her concern for His Grace's reputation. Of course. Adelaide remembered the way Octavia had looked at Gabriel, the possessive edge beneath her politeness. What should I do? That depends on what you want. If you wish to salvage your reputation, you must distance yourself from Ravensleigh immediately, publicly. Make it clear you have no designs on him. And if I don't, Lady Pemberton's expression softened, then you must be prepared for the consequences. The Tun does not forgive women who overstep. Adelaide left Pemberton House in a daze. The carriage ride home felt interminable. Her father took one look at her face and poured her a brandy. Tell me. She told him everything. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. What do you want to do? I don't know. Do you care for him? Adelaide closed her eyes. Yes. Does he care for you? I think so, but I don't know if it's enough. Her father set down his own glass. Then you must decide whether you're willing to risk everything on I think so. Adelaide did not attend the next gathering at Ravensleigh House. Instead, she sent a note, brief, polite, final. Your Grace, I regret. I cannot continue our acquaintance. Recent circumstances make it inadvisable. Thank you for your kindness. Miss Fairchild, she sealed it before she could reconsider. 2 days later, Gabriel appeared at her father's house. The butler announced him with barely concealed shock. Adelaide, who had been reading in the morning room, stood abruptly. Show him in. Gabriel entered, and she saw immediately that he was furious. Not loudly. His control was too ingrained for that. But it radiated from him nonetheless. Miss Fairchild, Your Grace, this is unexpected. I received your note. I assumed you would. Would you care to explain it? Adelaide glanced toward the door. Her father had made himself scarce, but propriety dictated the door remain open. She kept her voice low. I think you know why. I know there are rumors. I don't care about rumors. You should. They affect you as much as me. They affect you more. Which is why I'm here. Adelaide's composure cracked slightly. What do you want me to say? That I'm willing to be ruined for the possibility of your regard. I'm not that foolish. I'm not asking you to be ruined. Then what are you asking? Gabriel stepped closer, his voice dropping. I'm asking you not to disappear because other people have decided you're inconvenient. That's easy for you to say. You're a duke. I'm a baron's daughter with a reputation for eccentricity. We are not equally positioned. I know that. Do you? Because from where I stand, you risk nothing by continuing this acquaintance. I risk everything. Gabriel's jaw tightened. You think I risk nothing? I think you risk discomfort. I risk exile. The silence between them was sharp, painful. Gabriel's hands flexed at his sides. What do you want from me, Adelaide? The use of her given name struck her like a blow. She forced herself to meet his gaze. I want you to understand that I will not be the woman who waits in shadow, while you remain untouched by consequence. If you want me in your life, it cannot be as a secret. And if you're not willing to claim me publicly, then I cannot continue this. Gabriel stared at her, and she watched something shift in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or fear. I need time to think. Then take it. But don't ask me to wait. He left without another word. Adelaide sank into the chair, her hands shaking. Her father appeared in the doorway. Are you all right? No, did you mean what you said? Every word. He nodded slowly. Then you've done the right thing, even if it doesn't feel like it. Adelaide didn't respond. She stared at the empty doorway, wondering if she'd just lost the only man she'd ever truly wanted. Outside, spring rain began to fall, soft and relentless. Gabriel returned to Ravensleigh House and went directly to the library. He poured himself a brandy, drank it, poured another. Adelaide's words circled in his mind. I will not be the woman who waits in shadow while you remain untouched by consequence. She was right. He had been content to let their acquaintance remain private, to enjoy her company, without risking his carefully maintained reputation. He had told himself it was prudence. It was cowardice. He thought of Catherine, of her final words. Promise me you will not live as stone. He had broken that promise. For 3 years, he had lived exactly as stone, hard, cold, impervious. And now, when someone finally asked him to be human, he had hesitated. He set down the glass and walked to the east corridor. Catherine's portrait hung uncovered now. He had stopped hiding it after Adelaide's visit. What would you do? He asked the painted face. Catherine's smile seemed to answer. You know what I'd do. Gabriel stood there for a long time, the house silent around him. Then he made his decision. The Ravensleigh House Ball was the event of the season. Invitations were coveted, attendance mandatory for anyone who mattered. Gabriel had not wanted to host it, but tradition dictated otherwise. Adelaide had not planned to attend. She had, in fact, planned to leave London entirely. Her father's country estate offered refuge and dignity. Then, the morning of the ball, a note arrived. Adelaide, if you come tonight, I will not hide. She read it 3 times. Her father, reading over her shoulder, said quietly, It's your choice. Adelaide dressed carefully. Deep ivory silk, simple lines, her mother's pearls. She looked like herself. No artifice, no performance. The carriage ride to Ravensleigh House felt both endless and too short. When she arrived, late enough to avoid the receiving line, the ballroom was already full. She stepped inside, and the room didn't quiet immediately, but gradually, heads turned, conversations faltered. Lady Octavia stood near the center, resplendent in crimson. When she saw Adelaide, her smile turned sharp. Miss Fairchild, how brave of you to attend. Adelaide met her gaze steadily. Lady Octavia, I do hope you'll enjoy the evening, though I suspect it may be rather uncomfortable for you. Before Adelaide could respond, Octavia raised her voice slightly, not shouting, but loud enough to carry. It must be difficult, mustn't it? Trying so hard to be noticed by a man so far above your sphere. All those books and clever words. Such ambition. The room had gone silent now. Adelaide felt every gaze on her, felt the weight of judgment pressing down. She should leave. Walk out with dignity. Let them whisper, disappear. Instead, she smiled. Ambition isn't a flaw, Lady Octavia, though I understand why you might think so. Octavia's eyes flashed. I simply worry for his grace. A man in his position must be careful of those who seek to use him. Indeed, he must. The music had stopped. Adelaide became aware of movement on the grand staircase. Gabriel stood halfway up, his expression unreadable. He had heard everything. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, deliberately, Gabriel descended. He walked directly to Adelaide. The crowd parted. He stopped before her, and his voice when he spoke was quiet, but absolutely clear. Miss Fairchild does not wait, and I have no wish to be a man she must. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. Adelaide's breath caught. Gabriel's gaze held hers, steady and certain. I have spent 3 years ensuring no one could reach me, he continued, his voice carrying now. I told myself it was discipline. It was fear, and I have no intention of living that way anymore. He offered his hand. Will you dance with me? Adelaide looked at his hand, then at his face. She saw no hesitation there, no calculation, only choice. She placed her hand in his. Yes, the music resumed, a waltz slow and deliberate. Gabriel led her to the center of the floor. Every eye in the room watched. He pulled her close, not improperly, but unmistakably present. I'm sorry I made you wait. You didn't. I told you I wouldn't. I know. That's why I'm apologizing. They danced in silence, the room spinning slowly around them. Adelaide felt the weight of consequence settling over both of them. The alliances Gabriel was fracturing. The invitations she would never receive, the future they were choosing together. When the waltz ended, Gabriel did not release her hand. Instead, he led her through the crowd, out onto the terrace. The spring air was cool, the garden below dark and fragrant. Music drifted faintly from inside. I will lose allies, Gabriel said quietly. I may lose my appointment to the Foreign Office. The Tun does not forget. I know. Are you certain you want this? Adelaide turned to face him fully. I'm certain I want you. The rest will manage. Gabriel reached up, cupped her face in both hands, firm, reverent, unhesitant. I burned, he said softly. I didn't understand what you meant that first night, but I do now. You set me on fire, Adelaide, and I'm grateful for it. He kissed her then, not tentatively, not as question, full, deliberate, restrained but unmistakably real. Adelaide's hands found his shoulders, steadied herself against the force of it. The kiss was everything she hadn't let herself hope for. Present, chosen, true. When they parted, she was breathless, but steady. What happens now? She asked. Now we go back inside, together, and we face whatever comes. They'll talk. Let them. Adelaide smiled, and it was not triumph, but recognition. You're different than you were. You changed me. No, I just reminded you who you were before you turned to stone. Gabriel's expression softened. Catherine would have liked you very much. I wish I could have known her. So do I. They stood together in the cool spring dark, the music swelling behind them. The future uncertain, but chosen. Finally, Gabriel offered his arm. Shall we? Adelaide took it. Yes. They returned to the ballroom side by side. The whispers rose and fell like waves, but Adelaide did not lower her gaze. Gabriel did not release her hand. Lady Octavia had already left. The ball continued, but the landscape had shifted. Some guests approached with cautious congratulations. Others turned away. Gabriel's closest political ally cornered him briefly, his expression grim. Adelaide watched it all with clear eyes. This was the cost. She had known it would be. Her father found her near midnight. Are you ready to leave? Not yet. He smiled faintly. Good. When the evening finally ended, Gabriel walked Adelaide to her carriage himself. Improper, but he seemed beyond caring. Will you come to Ravensleigh House tomorrow? He asked. For the library. For whatever you wish. Adelaide smiled. Then yes. He kissed her hand, lingering just a moment too long. Then he stepped back, and she climbed into the carriage. As they pulled away, Adelaide looked back once. Gabriel stood in the lamplight, watching her go. No longer the untouchable Duke of Ravensleigh, just a man who had finally chosen to burn. 3 months later, late summer light streamed through the windows of Ravensleigh House. Adelaide sat at the breakfast table, reviewing correspondence from her publisher. The translation of Rousseau's essays had been accepted under her nom de plume. Publication was scheduled for autumn. Gabriel entered, already dressed for the day, and poured himself coffee. Good news. They're publishing it. He leaned down, kissed the top of her head. I never doubted they would. Adelaide set down the letter. You've lost the Foreign Office appointment. I know. You don't seem bothered. I'm not. I have other priorities now. She looked up at him, and he smiled, genuine, unguarded. The past 3 months had not been easy. Gabriel's political allies had distanced themselves. Adelaide's social invitations had dwindled to a select few. But they had also been honest, present, real. They had married quietly, in a small ceremony attended by family and close friends. No grand spectacle, no performance, just vows spoken with intention. Adelaide had not disappeared. She had kept her work, her mind, her name in all but legal documents. Gabriel had not returned to stone. He had learned slowly to let himself feel. A knock at the door. Mrs. Dawes entered with the Morning Post. A letter from Lady Pemberton. Your Grace. Adelaide opened it, read quickly, then laughed. She's inviting us to her autumn salon. She says she's eager to hear my thoughts on the new translation. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. Does she know you're the translator? I suspect she does. Lady Pemberton is remarkably perceptive. Will you go? Will you come with me? Always. Adelaide stood, cross to him, and he pulled her close, not possessively, but as partnership. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. What you gave up? Gabriel considered. I regret that I waited so long to choose, but I don't regret the choice itself, even though it cost you, especially because it cost me. Things worth having usually do. Adelaide rested her head against his chest, felt the steady rhythm of his heart. I love you. I know. You've told me. I'm telling you again. He smiled against her hair. Then I'll tell you again too. I love you. I burned for you. And I'm grateful I did. They stood together in the morning light. The house quiet around them. The future uncertain. But theirs. Later, Adelaide would return to her translation work. Gabriel would attend Parliament, navigating his reduced influence with the same discipline he'd once used to avoid feeling anything at all. But for now, they simply stood together, two people who had chosen each other fully, who had refused to disappear or turn to stone, who had learned that burning was not destruction but transformation. Outside, the late summer sun warmed the old stone of Ravensleigh House. Inside, a fire burned low in the hearth, steady and sure. Adelaide did not wait, and Gabriel St. Clair, Duke of Ravensleigh, learned at last what it meant to burn, not in destruction, but in the fierce, tender light of being truly known. The dance card from that first waltz sat pressed between the pages of Epictetus, her name written in his hand beside first waltz. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. But this choice, this love, this life, they had chosen together. That made all the difference.